So I wanted to ask, to start the Q&A with asking you a question about something you mentioned in the introduction about the different genre for the film, and specifically about the approach of using a Western to tell the story. And how did you start conceiving the film and mixing the genre?
Bueno, muchas gracias por quedarse a la conversación. Siempre quise hacer un western, fue una decisión, o sea, quería hacer una película sobre lo que había pasado en Tierra del Fuego. Me parecía interesante hacer un western porque soy un cinéfilo. La película trata sobre un genocidio de un pueblo indígena, que es una historia que pasó en todo el continente americano, de norte a sur. Y me parecía que había que... Pero una reflexión sobre el cine. Yo no soy historiador, no soy... no es un panfleto político, no es una investigación, es una película. Y por lo tanto quería hacer una reflexión sobre el cine, y qué mejor que ocupar un género que había creado el cine.
First, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for staying. I always wanted to make a Western. I wanted to make a film around about Tierra del Fuego. And I'm a cinephile, and I wanted to make this film which is about a genocide of indigenous people. And this is something that happened all across the American continent from north to south. But I wanted to reflect on cinema itself. I'm not a historian. This isn't a political pamphlet. So I thought, what better way to do it than using one of its main genres.
And more? I can more. Y creo que claro, que desde ese punto de vista el cine western había sido una herramienta que se había ocupado como propaganda para mostrar que todas estas nuevas naciones se habían civilizado, se habían liberado. Y de alguna manera el cine había sido cómplice de eso. O sea, el cine participó en la construcción de la idea de todas las nuevas naciones americanas, y en ese sentido me parecía interesante que las dos primeras partes de la película fueran un western, pero que la tercera parte tuviera la película, yo digo, cuando digo que tengan un buen viaje, es porque también es una película que va mutando. Es un western, pero se va transformando en una película de horror, y después va siendo un thriller político, y en el fondo y finalmente también se está haciendo una película de propaganda para una nación, y la película va mutando, se va transformando, y deja una reflexión también del uso del cine, ¿no? Del cine como una máquina que tiene la capacidad no solo de captar la realidad, sino de distorsionarla y manipularla.
I thought that it would be an interesting point of view to use the Western, since the Western had been used as a propaganda tool to show that these new nations had been civilized and liberated. So cinema was complicit in the idea of these new American nations. So the first two parts are a Western, and when I tell the audience at the beginning, have a good journey, it's also because the film mutates into different genres as well. After it turns into almost a horror film, and then it's kind of a political thriller. So I wanted to reflect on the use of cinema as a machine that distorted and propagated this idea of America.
The way you structure the film is very interesting, and I was wondering if when you started writing the film, you had a co-writer, or two co-writers, I think.
One.
Well, a little bit of Mariano Lienas, maybe? Or just
is a collaborator.
A collaborator, okay. See, if you were already like at the writing process thinking about how you were going to structure the film, or if that came later when you were filming, or when you were editing?
Como yo soy montajista, me dediqué a ser editor 15 años, y sí, la película está construida con estos módulos que van mutando y transformándose en distintos géneros, Y sí, la película siempre fue pensada así. Después era más difícil saber qué pasaba en cada módulo, de qué se trataba cada módulo, y cómo sostener una película que tiene muchos personajes, que es muy coral y que es muy difícil mantener la empatía con los personajes. Entonces es una película que también creo que está que tiene muchos dispositivos durante la película para que el espectador pueda sentirse atrapado, siga la atención. Y también aprovecho o sea, es una película que el guión está todo el tiempo tratando de mantener la atención. La fotografía está tratando de hipnotizar al espectador y la música está sonando y el sonido está sonando para recordarnos que esto es una ficción y que estamos ocupando todas las herramientas que tiene el cine para manipular al espectador.
I'm an editor. I've been an editor for 15 years. So the film, I had always thought of it in this structure. It's built with these different modules, it's all of these different chapters, and it was always thought of in that way, these mutating chapters. What happens in each of those chapters is a little bit more complicated. I wanted to be able to support these characters and maintain as much as I could the empathy of the audience with these characters. And there are so many different devices in cinema that allow us to tell this story. I wanted to use those tools to keep the audience engaged. The photography hypnotizes the audience. The sound reminds us of the fiction of these tools that we're using, these cinematic tools that we're using to manipulate the audience.
Maybe we can bring Harry into the conversation, since you mentioned the music, and it's a really important part of the film. So I would like to hear from both of you about the collaboration. At what part of the project were you involved? And if you compose the music based on conversation, or if you were already like showing him images, and how the collaboration would be between both of you. And you can be really honest, both of you.
Felipe, do you want to begin?
No.
You want to see what I'm going to
Yes.
say? No, so for the film, I was asked to begin to work actually before the shooting, because they were requiring the arrangement of the song that we hear, like the lullaby or the Pretty Little Horses. So I had to write an arrangement, and so like Felipe and Antonia sent me the script beforehand, and then I wrote the arrangement for the script, and then afterwards, so it was interesting because I had the time to really dive into the project, dive into the story, dive into like all the period elements that are very, very important in the film. And then afterwards, when Felipe came back to Paris, we had a long, like very, very long conversations. I think sometimes it exhausted Felipe, but I really like to ask a lot. But I really like to have a lot of conversation with filmmakers, because they work for I don't know how many years on the project, and I just want to arrive at the end and just deliver the music like that. So it's very important for me, like, to understand the topic, and also this topic, which is very multi-layered and complex. So and then for the work itself, so we began to talk about concepts. Then we could talk about afterward, if you want, in details. And then I began to receive images from the editor, Mathieu Taponnier. So at the beginning, like very few sequence, but like 10, 15 seconds. And then afterwards, I began to work on a first cut. And it was interesting because sometimes what I was proposing was not fitted for the images. So we worked with moods instead of working directly to picture, and sometimes my propositions were more efficient when I was writing away from picture.
Y sí, a mí siempre quise hacer una película que tuviera música y pensaba que la película iba a tener música en las transiciones, como para la idea del viaje. Y me acuerdo que cuando vi el primer corte sentí que la película se podía tornar realista o seria. Y me di cuenta que que necesitaba algo más y que quería que toda la película tuviera música, porque justamente lo que quería era explorar esa manipulación o los géneros. Esto que la película va mutando en género, para mí algo que ayudó mucho en cómo la película se fue apoyando, en cómo la música va ayudándote a viajar en esos distintos géneros. Y fue un proceso de descubrimiento y muy interesante porque me permitió manipular más el material. O sea, yo pensaba que la música iba a ser un poco más clásica en el sentido solo para las transiciones y los viajes. Había pensado en 10 minutos de música y de repente fuimos por 40 minutos de música.
At first, I thought that the music would only be in the transitions, this idea of the journey, and then using the music to move from one thing to another. And after the first cut, I felt that it had turned too realistic. It felt too serious. So I realized that I needed something more, and I wanted the entire film to have music. I love this idea of the mutating genres, and I feel like the music helps you move through these genres. It was a discovery process, really, because I thought at the beginning I thought it would only be like classical music that I would be inputting, and maybe about 10 minutes of it, and it turns out that we included music in 40 minutes of the movie.
I mean, I think the music is in this film really, really works. If the music doesn't work, you're better off without any, because you're not gonna ruin your film. But this way, it emphasizes like the beauty and the terror like simultaneously, and it does bring the audience in a journey. I'm not sure we feel manipulated, so you do like to say manipulated a lot, but I think we feel...
I didn't think about manipulation.
He's a big manipulator. But I felt we were really transformed and transported with the characters and with the story.
Vicuña manipula un poco la realidad y no me gusta hacer críticas a las cuales de las cosas que no sé. Por lo tanto, un poco, sí, siento que digo manipular porque es una operación que hago como cineasta y en la cual creo. Sí, creo que no se traduce, pero sí, creo que el cine manipula la realidad, no la representa. Creo que es una idea del siglo XX, estamos en el siglo XXI y creo que las imágenes son cada vez más manipuladas y van a poder ser más manipuladas aún prontamente.
I do think that cinema manipulates. I want to be critical of it. I say manipulate because I do feel that it's something that I do and that cinema does. We think that these images represent, but more and more images manipulate.
How did you meet each other? Like, were you aware of Harry's music, or you approached Harry? How did it start?
We met through the co-writer, Antonia Girardi, and because I had the chance to study at Sciences Po in Paris with Antonia, we studied ecology together it's like a master program that was created by the anthropologist Bruno Latour. Yeah, so we're going into very different directions, but like ecology is quite present in the film, so I think it was also quite a reason to start in this process. And then I was a silent film pianist, accompanist at the Cinémathèque Française in Paris. Yeah. So
we need you from time to time.
With great pleasure.
We're playing La Roue by Abel Gance if you want to play for 7 hours.
With pleasure, you know. I did like King Vidor films, you know, so The Great Parade. So I'm like, it's okay. No. So we met with Antonia, and so Antonia and Felipe sent me the script, and so that's how we started to work together. And I think like Felipe needed to have like a very close relationship with the composer, like to. Also because it's like a huge co-production, so I think he needed to have like someone who is very close to him to try things, to experiment things. And I think like, yeah, this whole process of experimentation was very important, to take the time to go in wrong directions and retry, because it's a very hands-on process. Like until you put image to picture, you don't know if it's going to work.
Soy un poco intenso, entonces necesitaba trabajar con alguien que conociera, que creía que se podía involucrar de una manera emocional y creativa, y que estuviera abierto a experimentar y que pasáramos por distintos momentos. Entonces sí, la música también ayudó a experimentar mucho en el montaje, ¿no? Como que pudimos abrirnos a posibilidades y cambiar el ritmo de la película. A mí me interesaba mucho que la película no fuera contemplativa, que la película durara menos de 100 minutos, o sea, yo quería que la película durara 90, 92 minutos. Y sí, para mí era muy importante trabajar con alguien que conociera, porque ustedes vieron los créditos, una película con 9 países, una gran coproducción, y a veces es bueno trabajar con gente que uno conoce y no solo con desconocidos.
I can be really intense, and I needed to work with somebody that I knew for this. I needed to know that they were going to be able to involve themselves emotionally and creatively, open to experiment. And I feel like the music also helped us try out new things during the editing process, to change the rhythm. I didn't want it to be a contemplative film. I wanted it to be less than 100 minutes. I knew that. And I actually wanted it to be like 90 minutes. And when you see the credits, you see how large our crew was. So it was important to me to have somebody close, somebody that I knew, and not always be working with people that I didn't know.
Can you also talk about your relationship with the director of photography? Because the look of the film, it's very vivid, but it's also a period piece, and it's something that's difficult to accomplish. The color, there's some choice in coloring, there's a choice in the format, there's many, I'm sure, discussion with him, and I wanted to know how you worked together.
Bueno, Simone es un director de foto, es su segunda película.
Yeah, he did the Tale of the King Crab.
Sí,
Yeah,
okay. Estuvo acá, ¿no? Current. Pero trabajó muchos años en color como DIT, es un director de fotografía que sabe mucho de color. Y cuando nos conocimos, siempre yo quise hacer una película que ocupaba de referencia el autocroma, que son los primeros experimentos de fotografía de los hermanos Lumière. Y a esa escena, esa idea a Simone, que es una persona que trabaja y maneja muy bien el color, le fascinó. Entonces pudimos como entendernos muy bien desde el comienzo. Y creo que él fue moviendo los límites, y a mí todo lo que sea mover límites y provocar, ir más lejos, me gusta mucho. Y fue una relación muy importante durante la película. Y el aspect ratio de la película tiene más que ver con que para mí el western es un género que trabaja con la última tecnología, es un género que se trata de la civilización, de la tecnología, y ocupa la tecnología. O sea, John Ford ocupaba el Technicolor porque era la última tecnología. Nosotros ocupamos una imagen digital, full frame, en el nuevo formato que graban las cámaras digitales de hoy. Y yo tengo un gran amor por la audiencia. La película está pensada para ver en cine, pero me encantaba pensar que en un iPad, que en una tablet, que en un teléfono, que en un computador, en las nuevas pantallas es tamaño completo. Entonces es una película que, si bien está pensada para el cine, yo pensé cómo iba a funcionar en las otras pantallas. Y Simone también tuvo la libertad para explorar mucho en cómo era esa construcción de esas primeras fotos de comienzos de siglo. Y se hizo mucho trabajo de retoque de color y mucha libertad y mucha referencia en pintura también.
So the director of photography, Simone, it was his second film, and he's someone that really knows color. I wanted to bring the autochrome experience from the first experiments of the Lumiere brothers, and he worked really well with color, and he loved that idea. He's also somebody that really likes to push the limits, and everything that has to do with going against the current, going further, pushing limits, I really enjoy. The aspect ratio, that part of it had to do more with using the latest technology. Ford, in his films, he uses Technicolor because it was the latest technology at the time. So I feel like the Western always has that using the cutting edge technology. So I decided to use, we use digital, full frame, the newest format. I also thought about the audience. I have a great love for the audience. And I wanted this, it's meant to be seen in the theaters, but I also took into account, took into consideration how it would come across in a tablet or a phone or a laptop. So this fits into the full screen of these types of devices. I also, Simone, he also had the freedom to explore a lot with like the first photos. We did a lot of retouching, and we also did a lot of references from paintings, from art.
Everything was shot in Tierra del Fuego?
Todos los exteriores fueron filmados en Tierra del Fuego.
Okay. How difficult or crazy was it?
All outdoor scenes were done in Tierra del Fuego.
Fue muy difícil. Bueno, yo soy además muy de interior, de café, no soy una persona outdoor. Y fue muy Tierra del Fuego es un territorio hermoso, pero es muy violento, hay mucho viento, el suelo es de turba, que es de agua, es como caminar por la luna, hace mucho frío. Y sí, fue una experiencia muy difícil, pero el proyecto involucró emocionalmente a todo el equipo, y el equipo fue muy solidario y siempre estuvo muy dispuesto a filmar en todo momento con el frío, meterse al mar. En ese mar hace un frío que no se pueden imaginar. Y lo difícil era cuando salió el sol, porque tuve mucha suerte, el tiempo cambia mucho, pero siempre tuve sol. No se sabe por qué, siempre había sol, y yo dije, bueno, no es tan grave, metí la mano al agua, y el problema es el viento, te quemaba todo, se quemaba en todo el cuerpo, y todos estuvieron dispuestos a hacerlo, y eso fue muy lindo.
The filming outdoors was very difficult, and for me, well, I'm an indoor person. I'm a cafe type of person, not very outdoorsy. And it's beautiful, but it's very violent. There's the wind, the cold. It feels like walking on the moon. It was a difficult experience, but the crew and the cast were all very emotionally engaged, which was great. That sea, you can't imagine the cold of that sea. But we always had sunshine. I was very lucky. Weather changes a lot there, but we always had sunshine. I don't know what it was. But the wind is probably the hardest. The wind burns you, and it was burning them. But they were all in on it. They were all really engaged, really supportive of each other. And really there was a lot of solidarity within the crew.
Everybody suffered a lot in the wind. Do we have time for audience question? Yes? Okay. So we have microphones, right? Yes. So there's someone here. And the microphone is... There's a microphone coming. Thank you.
A lot of the film was filmed at night. Was nighttime scenes? Was it really filmed at night, or did you just make it nighttime afterward with the computer?
No, siempre se filmó de noche. O sea, la película siempre fue considerada como una película que tenía ciertas escenas importantes que tenían que suceder en la noche. Y esas escenas se filmaron todas de noche. No hay noche americana en la película. No hay ninguna noche americana. Simone no lo hubiera... Lo pensé, quería, porque me gusta la artificialidad a mí en el cine. A mí era una idea que no me molestaba. Pero para Simone era importante filmar en las noches y a mí me gusta respetar lo que también mi equipo, el trabajo de ellos y era un poco más difícil, pero viéndolo el resultado creo que fue muy interesante filmar de noche.
The movie was always filmed at night. From the get-go, we knew that we were going to have a lot of important scenes that were going to happen at night, and Simone wouldn't have allowed it. I wanted to. I like working with the artificial, but I also want to respect my team's work and what they do. It was certainly more difficult, but the results were really interesting.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we still have a lot of questions for you and the next films, because it was such an incredible debut film. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Harry, for being here as well. Thank you, Cordelia. Thank you to MUBI, and I'm really excited that the film will be opening in next year in the US, so people will have a chance to come back and see it and tell all your friends.
Thank you. Thank you for the